Okay, welcome, Jason Knight, to the podcast today. Jason, as many of you I'm sure will know, is a product consultant and podcaster. He runs the fantastic One Night in Product podcast and has been a member of the product management community for a good number of years now, and is often out there offering advice and great content as well. Jason, welcome, and thanks very much for finding some time to chat today.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. And yeah, I've been around the block a few years now, and all I can say is that if any of my posts offended anyone or made them annoyed, then I do apologize. It's all meant in good spirit.
Yeah,
But I
I'm sure
think
they have.
that but I think that one of the most interesting and most important things to do with regard to the advice, because there are so many people giving advice these days. I think I think it's really important to make sure that it's useful, it's different, it's not just platitudes. But yeah, I also I've had people that have been like, I've had to stop following you on LinkedIn because you keep posting too much. It's like, oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, well, there's a saying around that. It's only when people are getting bored of hearing you that your message is actually getting through, isn't it? I guess that's
Exactly, yeah, you need to say it
that's the
six
thing.
times or seven times or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Well, I'm enjoying the content anyway, Jason.
Oh, thank you
Please
very
don't
much.
let that
I'll
keep
keep
going.
posting it then.
Yeah, good stuff. So today, what I like to talk about is obviously the impact that AI is having on product managers, the role and product teams. Don't really want to waste people's time about talking, whether AI is going to replace them. I think that's a pretty tedious subject that's been torn apart a lot over the last few years. Much more interested actually in how PMs can be proactive and embrace the technology in a way that is valuable, obviously for them in their roles and also for their customers, which is really what they should be focusing on, in my opinion. So I guess that the first thing and the interesting thing that a few people have been writing about, a few of the kind of thought leaders in the space have been writing about, is product managers as creators and as builders. And obviously, AI, rightly or wrongly, probably gives PMs the opportunity to go deeper into areas that they might not have done previously. I'm sure there's a lot of PMs out there experimenting with vibe coding who are making mock-ups and prototypes where perhaps they didn't feel like they had the skills to do before. Be interesting to just get your initial thoughts on that topic, Jason.
So it's an interesting one because obviously that's everything that you just said is 100% true. Like, obviously there are things that people couldn't do before that they can do now, and to be honest, that's wonderful. I see that just as much as a positive thing as, for example, the people from like overseas that have been like, oh, now I can actually write fluently in English because I can use ChatGPT to tell me all my mistakes and stuff like that, and it can kind of make me a more effective communicator. All of that, and I kind of see this very much in the same bucket as that. Like, you could do something a bit or maybe not at all, and it's now helping you to do that thing that you couldn't do before. But
Yeah.
I will say, I started out as a developer many, many years ago now, and I was a developer for a while, and then I kind of did a bit of kind of co-development and product, and then slowly sort of faded all the way into product. I could still do a bit of development. I still do bits and bobs nowadays, side projects and stuff. But yeah, I've very much kind of gone all in on the product side. And what I will say is that obviously it's wonderful in some ways to be able to, crank out some code. But I could crank out code anyway, like years ago while I was
Mhm.
doing the product stuff. And I will say, looking back on it, I actually believe that every second that I spent writing code or, building stuff myself was actually not a waste of my time, but it was time that could have probably been better spent doing something that other people in the company weren't doing. So, for example, I'm sitting there saying, okay, well, now I'm a developer, I can develop all this stuff. We already have developers. They can also develop the stuff and they can probably do a better job than you. But okay, designers the same. Like, we've got people in the company that know how to design, and not just that they know how to prompt, but they actually know what good design looks like, what a good design language looks like. Okay, cool. And yeah, you could argue then quite happily that I could start as a product person. Why are we just limiting it to engineering and design? Like, why don't I start firing up an army of SDRs and start trying to sell the product as well? Or why don't I start trying to do the creative work and start to be the do the content marketing as well? You could argue that PMs could be doing any of these things. I
Mhm.
think that still, even in the age of AI, the big benefit and the big the kind of it's a tedious word, but like the force multiplier that product people bring to the table is that they care not about the quality of the code or the quality of the design or any of the things around it. They care about all of it. Now,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that they should be uninterested in all those things, but their job isn't to make those things, or their unique value isn't to be able to make those things. You could just as easily say, the developer could just do the product stuff instead, or a designer could do the development. Like, why is it the product person that gets to do that? The product person has a different goal. I actually quite like Marty Kagan's take on like what the role of product management is in a business. Now, obviously, Marty has his admirers and his haters, as any kind of high profile person does. But I remember watching him at a keynote earlier this year in the Netherlands, and he was kind of taking umbrage at this idea that like the PM is at the center of like design and tech and
Yeah.
business, and that is actually, we've got designers that know how to design, we've got engineers that know how to do the tech. Product managers should be the business. Like we see too many times product managers talking about, in air quotes, the business. Product managers are the business. Like, we're all part of the business, but they should be representing the business. They shouldn't just be sitting there playing kind of, you know, cosplay developers just because now they've got a tool that can crank out code that may or may not be good because they don't know, because they've never done it before. Like, they can do that if it helps them along, but I don't think that should be like their key role. Their goal or their key advantage is to be able to bring all of the different strands together and make sure that whatever is being built actually serves a customer need in a way that the business can monetize, in a way that's, like the old risk, viable, feasible, all the rest of it. Like,
Yeah.
their job is to take care of all of it, not just to start sitting there thinking that it's exciting to build things now, so let's just build a load of garbage and pop it out without even doing any of the other work around it. And I guess that's the problem. It's the temptation. We can just
Yeah.
build anything now, so we don't need to do any of the good work around it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure there are lots of product designers out there who have been tearing their hair out because the product manager has got a license to sketch or something and has been having a crack at doing user interfaces. But I wonder whether there is some value. Again, if we're thinking about those kind of risks of usable, feasible,
Yeah,
commercially viable, and kind of reducing those risks,
yeah,
whether there is value for PMs to have a better understanding and exploring some of those things themselves in order to have more rich conversations with designers and engineers. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't advocate. I think anybody that's played around with any of the kind of AI coding tools or vibe coding tools will know quite quickly there's a massive gap between like production ready code, something you could ship and build a business on, versus being able to hack something together that runs on your local machine. Right, there's a huge gap there. But is there some value in even just prototyping? Right, so if a PM starting to think about a feature, and they use whatever it might be, whether it's um, yeah, Wizard or Bolt or Lumber or whatever, to just start playing around with components and just figuring this thing out in order to have better conversations with the team. Do you think that's fair, or do you think actually? I mean, I suppose the purist would say, well, actually, the team should be involved in those conversations from day one. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think, to the start at the end, like 100% the team should be involved in all those things. Like, what I don't really like to see, and it obviously happens, is, for example, a product manager going off into their shed and, just like, trying to build something and then bring it out afterwards. Like, be it a spec or a prototype or strategy document or whatever else it is. Like, these things should be done collaboratively, and like, one of the kind of great factors of AI is that they can help you to do, and just tooling in general, is that there's so much tooling these days to enable you to collaborate. So, like, 100% PMs can and should be using these things to help them sharpen their thinking, make their case, do all of the things that they need to do. But I don't like this idea that they're just going to go off and do it on their own and then bring it back and present it to the development team or to the design team. And you sit there and say, okay, well, does it enable product people to have better conversations? It's like, or also to develop understanding, I think you mentioned as well. It's like, well, maybe, but there's a couple of risks there. One of which is, well, just because you can again, like crank out a template or vibe code a prototype or something like that, or a V1 or an MVP, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't mean you understand it. Obviously, you've outcomes over outputs, fine. So you can still see the thing, and you can have a conversation about that thing. But I sort of think back to, again, back when I was a developer still and doing product, kind of two jobs at the same time, working with a development team that I was also managing, and I found myself very often, in fact, probably most of the time, not just being drawn into solution mode, but
Mhm.
also being drawn into very specific aspects of the solution mode. So like I'd be writing up little stories or whatever to pass across to the team, who would, then go and work on the things, because I had to do all the product stuff, and then I'd come check the engineering stuff later on, and kind of back and forth between the two. And I'd find myself, writing tickets that had very specific sort of database schemas in, and different like fragments of code and like libraries that I'd found that do the thing that I'd found somewhere, and just recommend that they use that. And it's like, obviously, on the one hand, it's kind of my job at that time, but like what I wouldn't want to do or to see is like a product person who doesn't really know anything about any of the stuff, like, because they maybe haven't been an engineer, they've not got the technical background, and they're kind of just sort of sitting there, vibe coding some stuff, whatever comes out, pops out, looks all right, or whatever random library that ChatGPT recommended, because it will recommend a different one,
Yeah,
almost
each
every time,
time.
half
Yes.
the time. Yeah, it's like you sit there and you go, well, okay, well, how does that help them have a good conversation with the engineers about like what good architecture looks like, or whether we should be using microservices, or whether we should have a monolith, or like what type of merge or kind of pull request strategy they should have. Like that doesn't help them with any of those things. But I
Mhm.
think that the risk is that it kind of makes them think that they can have those discussions in the same way that we've all sat there in the past and sat there with other stakeholders within the business that are somehow, because they've either watched one video on YouTube, or because they've just been working in a company for a bit, they just think they can tell you your job because because they've seen something. We object to when people do this to us. So like, why should we not, or why should others not object to when we do it to them? On the other hand, if you're sitting there saying, should a product manager be afraid of cranking out a prototype and using it as a discussion piece, or some kind of clickable working kind of vibe coded rough thing that they can say, okay, well, look, folks, this is what's on my mind, like this is what I see. I could spend 2-3 weeks or whatever trying to crank out some document, probably also using an LLM, but cranking some spec out and trying to perfect it and trying to describe it in words, or I can just show you what's in my mind. That's a fantastic thing to be able to do. Like, why would you not want to do that? I also think that there are wonderful. I think back to some of the products that I've worked on in the past, API products, for example, where you're sitting there with an API product that's going to be integrated by developers into like a banking platform or whatever. Cool, but you're selling it to non-technical business users in these, in the banks, and they don't. They might have a basic understanding of what an API is, but when you're demoing something that's just a page of like JSON output, that's not something that resonates with them. So we would, at the time, with the support of the engineering team, crank out little mini apps that would be used to almost like, this is a fake bank app that you can use that's got your brand on it, so we can just show you and make it feel real to you. Like, we could have vibe coded 150 of those easily. I mean, obviously we use templates and stuff, but just this idea that using some of these tools to kind of almost have the same types of conversations but express them in a different way, I think that's incredibly powerful, and all PMs should be doing that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong point, and I agree. There's yeah, being able to play with something and all see
Yeah.
the same. There's that whole thing. You can talk to five people in a room and they'll all nod and say they understand, but they all leave the room with a slightly different version
Yep.
of what you said in their head. So
Yeah.
actually having something that you can play around with, not just visualize, but work with, I think is incredibly valuable. And Jason, have you
100%.
seen teams working like this? Have you seen, how AI is impacting the way that kind of, what we might traditionally call the product trio are working together? And can you maybe just explain a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of either like just better working, whether it's optimizing speed, optimizing learning capability, as we've kind of talked about. What we're just talking about now really is about using AI to improve learning and communication to reduce risk when you get to the build stage. Yeah, just it'd be good to hear your thoughts around what you're seeing teams doing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, look, it's a mixed bag, and it's a mixed bag, obviously, depending on the types of company and the types of team that you're working on. I've definitely worked with clients, consultants. I work with lots of different types of clients in lots of different types of industries, and I've definitely worked with clients that are like, they've been literally every new product specification now must have a vibe coded prototype. Effectively, it's almost like an
Right.
edict that has been
Interesting.
added in, or kind of put into their, I don't know, product operating manual or whatever. So like there are teams out there that are doing that, and again trying to use that not as a like a version one, this is the thing that we're going to ship, but just
Yeah.
this idea that like sometimes a picture speaks 1,000 words, right? So there's definitely some of that going on. I obviously see people doing general prototyping and passing prototypes around, and using those as, again, kind of version ones for discussion. uh, Engineering teams, obviously, I see them doing their best to speed up using actual, probably like not really vibe coding, but actual coding tools, just to try to start to, for example, take or get rid of technical debt, to make sure that they can move, the product can move faster in the future, because they've got a product that's reliant on some library that's 15 years old and 10 years out of support or something like that, and like it's starting to sort of drag them down, and or there's like the security vulnerabilities that mean they're not SOC 2 compliant anymore, or whatever it is. So like they're sitting there and they're using it to chop through some of that tech debt. And for me, to some extent, that's a really good idea. Like, why would you not try and use something like that to clean up stuff like the most boring, annoying, frustrating work that engineers have to do, like trying to effectively re-platform a library or something, or replace libraries and make sure that the functionality works exactly the same. I've seen teams using AI to extract, for example, usage analytics and journeys from from the product, from tools like Amplitude or whatever, and sort of dump those out and create effectively automated test cases and get AI agents to go and like crawl all over the site to make sure that they work. Now, I'm going to caveat that and say that probably you could have done that without AI, but at the same time, like those are interesting use cases. I've seen teams start to experiment, not seen too many results from this so far, but start to experiment with using AI to trawl over all of the feedback and the feature requests that have ever happened on their product. Because, of course, we all know most of them aren't ever going to get done. But at the same time, there's probably still a bucket of them somewhere, no matter how many people sit there saying you should just delete them all after a while. I don't see that happening in many companies. But there's a bucket of feedback, very difficult to understand what's in there. So just try and surface themes out of that using AI to kind of aggregate stuff and pull stuff out. And there are pros and cons to that. Probably, I'm sure that it would miss some stuff that a person would maybe find interesting. But at the same time, it's a great way to to do some of these things that maybe PMs weren't doing enough of before. Also, another thing which I'm advocating for, and I've seen some people trying to do, is almost using LLMs, for example, as a way to tighten up their thinking before they go and do that big presentation. So, or whatever, like you've got a spec, or you've got a strategy, or you've got a request that you're going to need to put in, and you rather than just sort of writing it yourself and laboring over it and then just going in kind of with one arm tied behind your back because you don't know what they're going to think, and just say, okay, well, what do you think someone that's like this would think of that sort of thing, or what are the obvious holes, what's missing from this? And actually, like one of the things that I've found is, like, obviously people have to give a lot of presentations or updates and stuff in product management, and they sort of sit there and they give the presentation, and there's like you read what they're going to say, or the notes that they're going to say, and you're like, well, look, I've got like 8 immediate questions just based on exactly what what you've showed me, and I kind of know the product as well. So if I've got 8 questions that you haven't answered, well, first of all, I want you to go and answer those 8 questions before you go and present this to other people. But also, other people can have different questions. So how can we use it to anticipate the questions versus just sort of expecting that we can just, again, just vibe code our way to success? Like, that's another option. But for me, a lot of it's around tightening up thinking, making what you work on more, I mean, I'm not going to say bulletproof, because, nothing's ever bulletproof, but just to kind of harden what you're working on, so that when you do bring people together, they're not then getting caught in God knows how many different debates or arguments, or, telling you to go away and come back again because you've missed a big thing that everyone was thinking about or whatever. So, like, again, your mileage will vary on that, but I think stuff like that could be incredibly powerful alongside the more obvious use cases of, again, vibe coding prototypes so that people can align around a concept, or even like journey maps and stuff that people can pull out, and they sort of pull those out and kind of flesh those out sort of step by step rather than just being cards. Obviously, there's a danger that you can kind of overspecify a solution way too soon. But at the same time, if it gets you thinking about the problem, as long as you kind of maintain that attitude and you don't just jump straight to, oh, well, let's just have that then. I mean, that's obviously the big problem with vibe coding anything, is this idea that you show it to a curious, passionate, senior leader, founder within a company, and they're like, well, yeah, well, I want that. It's like, no,
Yeah.
no, no, we're just using this to provoke. No, 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 I want that. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
maybe you should build that, but like, you shouldn't just build it because it looked cool and someone saw it. Like, you still need to do your product management work around it as well.
I think that's a really solid point as well, Jason. And I think that idea of using AI as a as a tool to help your rigor, the rigor of your thinking in a
Yeah,
first pass. I think that's tremendously valuable, and particularly for like repetitive tasks, you can obviously start to systematize those things. So, you're talking about, for example, going through product, backlogs of ideas and things like that. You can obviously start to apply, rules and checklists and the criteria that it needs to meet, and just start to do that first path, very, very quickly. And actually, Teresa Torres is doing a load of really great stuff at the moment. If you follow Teresa Torres, her
yep,
blog,
yep,
she's gone deep into the AI, sort of down the AI rabbit hole, and she's doing some really lovely stuff at the moment, where she talked about kind of how she's working, and how she's systematizing anything that she does more than once or twice. She's
yep.
creating rules for and documents for to rerun. I think some of that stuff can be can be very, very powerful. Um,
Yeah, look,
okay.
the biggest. Sorry, just to finish, just to kind
Yeah.
of wrap a bow around that one. I think one of the biggest. I mean, maybe not a crime, but one of the biggest concerns I have around teams, and it's been a concern, for best part of 20 years, is like, so way before even the current wave of tools and such. But it's like, it's okay to do things inefficiently. It's okay, maybe even to do things inefficiently for a little bit, like if you're still trying to work out whether those are the things to do. But once you know that you want to do them, you should find whatever tools or approaches that you can to make sure that you don't have to keep doing them like that in the future. So whether that's LLMs, or whether that's using good old fashioned rules based this, or just a little bit of code, or just a macro that you wrote in Excel, like whatever. Like, these are all things that are completely. I would sit there again. Over the years, I've sat there and I've watched people. I had one job where, like, people would just be sitting there, like, just manually pasting stuff between two Excel sheets, like on a monthly basis. It's like, okay, fine. That's an extreme that's an extreme example, but it's there are versions of that going on everywhere. And if you're sitting there, even before LLMs and agents and whatever else that people are talking about these days, even before then, if you were sitting there and accepting that that was okay, and you can just keep kind of turning the handle versus finding a way to hook up a motor, like, well, you weren't. I mean, it's not that you weren't doing your job. Maybe that wasn't. Maybe you weren't told that was your job. But like, who wants to do those kinds of things?
Yeah.
Like, you should always try and find ways to speed things up, and not just sort of sit still and be spending all of your time. Because another thing is, like, we sit there and we say, well, what should product managers be doing? Should they be builders, etc., etc., etc. Now, I've always liked to consider product managers to be builders, but obviously they're building in a different way. But
Yeah.
like, so many of the things that product managers are supposed to be doing and often complain that they're not doing around, for example, user research, or doing strategy work, or stakeholder engagement, and kind of getting more in touch with the industry that they work in, etc. Like, they're not doing these things because they're being drowned, because they're drowning in busy work and they're having to grind through all this stuff and do all this manual things. Like, if they aren't using the best of LLMs and again, agents and other tools around the kind of the AI landscape, if they're not using those, then they're not doing their job, because ultimately or rather they're doing a subset of their job, and they're never getting a chance to do the stuff which is actually the stuff that they should be doing. So yeah, I'm all for, as you say with Teresa, like, let's automate all the things as best we can. If we can in any way guarantee reliability and repeatability, we're not kind of just going to set stuff on fire because it hallucinates and goes down the wrong path and everything goes wrong. As long as we can still keep oversight and keep our eyes on it, then why wouldn't we do that? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of, 101 product management for me.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we talked about kind of using AI in your job to be kind of more productive and how it's impacting on teams. Of course, what we're really here for as product managers is to try and create value for our customers and make products that solve problems for our customers. I think there's two big things in that. I think there's probably a lot of PMs out there whose boss or even just their conscience is saying, we've got to be on this train and we need to be cramming some AI into our product somehow. And it'd be good to just hear your thoughts. I mean, I'm sure we've all used products now where actually that's been done badly and the AI is getting in the way. And they've just sort of sprinkled some dust over the product without really understanding how they're going to add value, for their customers. So actually, let's start with that. It'd be good to just hear your thoughts on, if you're a PM out there and your boss has just come to you and said, look, I know we're struggling, but if we get AI, we'll be $1 million company in days. How do they go about dealing with that?
Well, first of all, we've got to realize where some of this pressure comes from, right? Like, obviously, some of this pressure comes from whatever founders that are reading the right or the wrong blog posts, or they're kind of all in, or they're super passionate because they've just seen what they believe to be limitless possibilities, and they're like, yeah, absolutely. And we all know that, of course, there are a bunch of, depending on the company and depending on their mindset, there's a bunch of founders and leaders out there that they just there's a new idea and they want that idea. That's not all of them, but there's definitely a section of leadership that want that, and that's kind of admirable in some way. Like, I like excited people, but at the same time, I don't like to see people get disappointed. So, like, there's got to be some realism about it. But we've also got to be conscious of the fact that a lot of this pressure is coming from terrified investors who are sitting there saying, well, we've been investing X amount of money in your company for X amount of years, and we now believe that you're going to fall behind, or that your valuation is going to go down, either because you don't have all of the same AI features as your competitors, which obviously is a part of it, or because we believe, or they believe, that the AI is somehow going to take away your competitive advantage and anyone else could build your tool. So you're sitting there saying, well, we've been building this whatever supply chain management tool for 5 years, getting decent traction. We've got some good customers. We're turning over decent revenue, but now we believe that just anyone can just go and build that now and steal all of our customers. Now, of course, I'm not saying that can't happen. Of course, it could happen, but in the same way that could always have happened. Like, maybe it could happen a bit quicker now, but like, someone could always have built your tool, unless you've got some kind of lockup or unique data set or some moat that is not the technical thing that you've built. It's always possible someone build a new tool that did the same as your tool. Like, that's basically that's every SaaS platform out there. They're doing something that something else does. They're just doing it a different way, or they target a different set of people, or they have some different capabilities that they focus on, concentrate on, whatever. So, like, just being able to build stuff it's not really a moat. Like, anyone can build stuff. Okay, maybe now it's faster because people can crank out vibe code, a new supply chain management tool. Brilliant. Good for them. Like, good luck maintaining it, obviously, because once you've got over the initial rust and you realize that you've got to actually make it and keep it as a real product. But also, like, if your tool can easily be replicated, then you've probably got bigger, like that easily replicated, you've probably got other things to worry about. And of course, we all know that it's not just about the technical tool that you've built, but it's also about the distribution, the monetization, the partnerships, the data that the user generated content, all of the stuff that kind of makes you sticky. So I think but we do have to be conscious of the fact that this fear is out there. Both the fear that your company is going to get outmaneuvered by faster AI first competitors, and also that your product's going to start to look a bit naff because it doesn't have some cool features in it that your competitors do. Now, just putting things in because your competitors do is also a bad idea, because no one knows whether those things are actually working for your competitors. All you see is the stuff on the website. They're probably looking at your website, envious of your features that aren't working for you. Like, of course. But at the same time, with all of this being true, you can't just sit there and be like a doubting Thomas or Thomasino and just sort of sit there and say, okay, well, none of this matters, because it matters to them, and you've got to find a way to make something work for them. So for me, a lot of it's around, okay, fine. We acknowledge that there are these concerns and these kind of there's something in the water and we need to have some kind of answer for it. That answer probably can't be we're not going to do anything. However, and I think you kind of touched on it earlier with regards to kind of what product people should be focusing on. I still think there's a big role for product people to play to sit there and say AI can be a solution, certainly for all the things that we've already talked about, but certainly it can add value probably to what we're building. But let's not start with the AI. Like, let's start with the user problem and start to work out like what or where within our product can we, are there areas of like, again, unmet, underserved needs? Where could we be speeding things up, automating, like we said, to make things better for people rather than what you see a lot of people doing. Like I remember, I mean, I don't use Office 365 that much, but I remember logging into Office 365 when I was working with one client who used it. And I was horrified because like everything's just been replaced by just like Copilot garbage. Like I
Yeah.
can't find any of my files anymore. I can't find any of the applications that I used to just be able to go to that front screen and see. And now I
Yeah.
can't. I mean, you can get it eventually, but like they took a perfectly good, perfectly usable, perfectly serviceable interface that did everything that I needed, and they replaced it with AI garbage just because they wanted to say that they had AI on
Yeah.
it. Now, you can just copy that and copy and paste that across so many different places now. Like every single app I log into gives me a pop-up. Oh, do you want to use our AI this or AI that?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I don't. I just want to come and do the thing. What I
Yeah.
was already able to do perfectly acceptably. And you're basically making it harder for me to do things because you wanted to say you had AI and stuff. Now, good for you. Well done for having AI in. And if it helps with, I don't know, company valuation, or if it helps you with your sales story, then I guess I can't really argue with that. But I still like to think that the best things are the things that you don't, that don't have to hit you in the face. Like it's no accident that all of these tools or this AI functionality that's getting put into tools, well, they're kind of putting like 1990s pop-up advertising style pop-ups all over your screen when you log in. There's no accident. They're desperate for you to use it so they could prove some kind of return on investment. Now,
Yeah.
again, I'm not going to say there's no return on investment, but I don't think all of them have decent return on investment. So they're basically just trying to make you use stuff to prove that after the fact that it was a good idea to invest in them. And that's a terrible way to do it. That's not good product management. That's not good business management. But I understand where the fear comes from. And I think for me, a lot of it's just around how can you maintain almost like a kind of an optimistic, pessimistic kind of combination of like, we're optimistic about the future. We believe that these tools can do a lot of things. We want to help you and your company. We want to help with the narrative. We want to help, but we're also pessimistic in the sense that we don't believe that it can do all of the things that people say, and we want to check. And we definitely want to start with the user problem first, versus finding going and saying, oh, okay, well, LLM summarization or chatbots or whatever. Okay, let's make everything a conversational interface now, even though it was perfectly fine before and no one was complaining about that. I've seen people with products out there that, and I've worked with clients where you sit there and say, okay, well, you have this AI initiative. That's brilliant. But what about all these other flaws in your product that have been there for years that everyone's always been complaining about and your customers are churning because of, that you're not fixing? Why don't you fix those? Like with AI
Yeah.
if you can, but otherwise just fix them. I don't care how you fix them, but fix them.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of so I started life as a graphic designer a long time ago, and it reminds me of a sort of mantra that I used to read about back then, which was, really great design disappears, so
Yeah,
that the user doesn't really know. Like if you're reading a nice, if you're reading a book, the pages disappear and you
yeah,
you just forget about the interface. And that's
yeah,
the same with really great products. And I think you make a great point there. It's the same with AI. You shouldn't really be conscious almost that it's there. It's just in the background helping you achieve your goal, whatever that is. And I think, as the technologists have always struggled with it. I mean, I can remember, when no SQL was a thing, and there were a million and one products out there, or apps out there, where engineers were wrestling with no SQL databases for absolutely no good reason, other than the fact that they just really wanted to use no SQL, when
yeah.
actually an SQL database would have been fine and did the job perfectly well. So they're creating these tremendously complex architectures just because actually they were interested in the technology.
It reminds me of
So
a quote from Futurama. I don't know if anyone remembers Futurama from back in
yeah,
the
yeah,
day. There's a quote in. in Futurama where Bender the robot, gets launched into space and he meets God or what says it's God, and there's this kind of existential debate and conversation about you know God and free will and power and all the things. And the quote that this cloud of gas or whatever that he's talking to comes up with is like, when you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. And I think
Yeah,
that's really important. Like
yeah, yeah,
I mean, there are certainly areas of life where maybe a little bit more friction would be useful, but most of the time you don't need things slapping you in the face to do stuff. You just want to
yeah,
do the thing.
yeah, 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 completely. So I just want to move on to a sort of slightly different topic now, which is really whether how product managers build products. So we talk about sort of value and focusing on customer value and allowing customers to achieve their goals, get their jobs done. One of the things that Kagan's been talking about a bit recently is that shift from deterministic products to probabilistic products, where obviously a deterministic product, a bit like a calculator, it can do a number of functions. You're always going to get the same answer out, assuming the inputs are the same. Whereas obviously with products with AI, there is some variability there and there's some risk. They're predicting what to do based on a customer input and based on the context and the RAG that it's given, which creates a broader dimension of risk, I guess, for product managers. I just be interested to talk around that a little bit and whether the approach should be different or whether you're seeing teams kind of struggle with this a little bit. Obviously, with the big LLMs, obviously OpenAI and those kind of chat products is struggling in terms of the kind of conversations potentially that some of their customers are having. Um, in a lot of our kind of product managers products, the scope is much narrower, right? AI is just doing a very small role or a potentially smaller role, but there's still a risk there that you can't control what's going to happen, and that's going to have an impact on value, experience, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, ultimately it comes down to, you kind of mentioned it yourself, risk, right? Like if I'm sitting there, I don't know, I wouldn't want to fly on a plane that was using an LLM to make flying pilot decisions. Even though we all know that there have been many documented cases of either pilot suicides or pilot, just error, which has caused problems. I used to be addicted to air crash investigations or Mayday, as I used to watch it. I used to travel a lot. I used to watch it before I flew. My wife would always laugh at me, and I thought, well, it kind of makes me feel better that they probably fixed that problem now. Just move on to a different problem. But you're sort of sitting there and saying that, yes, okay, humans are imperfect systems, but they tend to be imperfect in predictable ways for the most part. Like, we've known about humans for long enough to know the kinds of ways that they might fail, and we try and put things in place to stop them doing or being able to do that, either with checklists or additional person next to you, and we kind of take the whatever risk is remaining and handle it as best we can. Obviously, the problem with something like like using an LLM as an example is like, okay, fine, we kind of know how they work, at least on a technical level, but there's a lot of magic going on in the multi-dimensional matrices that are inside them, and the different probability dimensions and the n-dimensional space that they're like. These are incredibly complicated. We don't understand 100%, and we can't predict what is going to happen when you put an input in. Now, obviously, with very common things, you can sit there, like things that have been written about a lot. You can probably imagine that the LLM will come out with something fairly okay, because people write about that a lot, and therefore there's plenty of examples in the training data, and the model's going to come out of a pretty good prediction. Whereas if you start going off down a rabbit hole, which is super niche, then maybe there's not so much training data, and there's much more chance that maybe it's going to start to hallucinate or basically come up with something that doesn't make sense. Of course, the problem is that both of them look exactly the same to the end user. If that end user doesn't know what the how to judge the truthfulness of the thing. So then you sit there and you say, okay, well, there's obviously people these days talking about AI evals and stuff like that. Like maybe we can pull together some tests so some known good tests to kind of verify and validate that the LLM is always putting out the right types of content for the right types of queries. And it's like, okay, I'll buy that. Like, why not? I was working on AI products before LLMs, and we used to try and do stuff like that. Again, they were simpler in many ways, but they were still they were probabilistic, and we wanted to make sure that they were going to give good results, or that we could at least have a almost like a percentage accuracy that we could claim, both from a marketing perspective, but also because our customers wanted that. They wanted to know that, yes, or they acknowledged that there was risk, that maybe it could be wrong, but that the benefits of the speed and the kind of breakout insights and such that they could get from whatever it was that we were providing them, they were prepared to take the risk because it did that in a way that they couldn't do in another way. Like what we were doing then was around kind of effectively social listening in a very specific space, trying to come out with like new emerging trends before they came out and became really obvious.
Right.
Now, that's the sort of thing that companies that operate in that space really valued. So they were happy to take the small risk, because really what we were doing in that situation was almost provoking them to go and find out more. Hey, you should make, banana flavored cola or something like that. Okay, well, that sounds like a thing that we might want to go investigate and see if that's actually true. But we've got an early warning signal based on the AI that says that we should do that, based on millions of conversations. Fine. But would I sit there and say, oh, well, we've got a bunch of banana conversations in our data set, and now the LLM or whatever AI tool has kind of said, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that's not happened before, so it's a breakout insight, so I'm now going to go off down this other rabbit hole that may or may not actually be true, because who knows, probably no way to tell, and your evals aren't going to work on that either, because that's not, you've never thought of that as a test case. And am I going to then automatically and whatever agentically plug that into a production line, and all of a sudden there's banana cola on the shelves all around the world, and no one's buying it because actually it was a misclassification, or because the LLM went down the wrong path or whatever? So again, I'm all for using AI to in all of its forms to try to work out ways to either provoke divergent thinking, or to try and work out different options, or to bulletproof your things, whatever it is. And that's something, of course, that can also be put into your products, so that your customers can do that sort of thing as well, or that you can surface insights to them that are not obvious, or that you can give them different ways to interact with you. And again, like with natural language, they can start chatting to you as well. Maybe they don't like typing, maybe it's a type of person, a cohort of people that have accessibility issues, and actually this is a way better way, and it's like opens up things. Or for international products, we can now offer you a product in any language, because we've got the layer over the top, and you can talk to us in your own language and it's fine. Like, there are so many things that you can do that are beneficial, but the risk is still there. And again, if you're running something that if it goes wrong is going to kill people, or is going to crater the valuation of your company, or just like flatten an economy, you probably don't want to leave that unattended. But then that starts to make whatever's left feel almost like low value stuff, because you sit there and say, well, okay, we're not going to turn off the coolant towers in the the nuclear power station or whatever, because of course we're not. But we could sit there and suggest what color screensaver to have on the computers in the lab or what. It's like, but okay, but that's not valuable. So it still needs to be valuable, but it needs to be valuable in a way that is almost the beginning of someone going off and doing that thing, versus expecting naively that you can push a button, everything's just going to go off, and what comes out the back of it is guaranteed to work. So yes, evals, yes, trying to come up with test suites, and yes, trying to come up with ways to validate what's coming in, and guardrails, and you mentioned rags and stuff as well, to try and base it in ground truth. All of these things are important, but there's always going to be a risk, whatever that percentage risk is these days with the latest frontier models. I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but you just have to accept that the value of what you're doing has to outweigh the percentage risk of it going horribly wrong, and you have to have the right safeguards to make sure that if it does go wrong, that you can catch it before it really causes any damage.
Yeah, and I think there's still, I think most products, even the most advanced kind of AI products, are still in that human approved state.
Yeah,
So the AI gets you to a certain point, but you still, you still need to say, yes, I want to carry on here, and kind of take it forward. And I think,
Yeah.
I think that, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Jason. We're still so early in figuring out how to use all this stuff
Yeah.
and drive value from it. I think, a lot of the value cases that we're seeing at the moment are the fairly obvious implementations. So obviously, chatbots and all that kind of stuff have done wonders. Well, I suppose a customer might not say that, but for the companies, they've done wonders for their support metrics and all that sort of stuff. As I say, I don't know whether the customers would necessarily agree with that. Um,
Yeah.
and there are sort of case studies evolving of really well applied AI that, as we were saying earlier, that is almost hidden in the product. I mean, Spotify DJ is a good example, or the way that Duolingo is using it in some of their sort of pro plans around helping people learn languages and things, I think is really great. But yeah, I feel like we're still very, very early and still figuring a lot of this stuff out.
Yeah, look, and maybe none of it works, right? Or not none of it, but like maybe some of it doesn't work. Like maybe there's going to be types of use case that people are thinking of that actually they aren't that promising, and they don't do the thing, and they are always going to need the humans and whatever else. Like maybe that's true for some, but who cares? Like this whole kind of stampede to AGI and wanting to replace everyone with a bunch of agents, like whether that's a good idea or not. Like if it doesn't work, who cares? Like there are still so many things we can do with what we've got today. So let's do them. And as things start to improve, or either linearly or whatever, but like as things start to get better and new breakout use cases happen, as long as we can trust them, let's start to do them as well. But I think there's a lot of probably quite understandable kind of excitement around some of this stuff, and I get it. Like I love technology. I'm excited about new technology. When I first saw LLMs working, I was like, "What? Yeah, wow, this is incredible." And I remain impressed. I've been playing, for example, with AI music generation recently, just having a noodle around with that, and it's incredible stuff. Like absolutely amazing. It's kind of flawed, and it's messy, and it doesn't always work right, and sometimes you have to run it a few times to get the right result, and you can never quite 100% trust the output, and you have to check, but it's still incredible. Let's keep using it. But like, let's just also be realistic about what it can and can't do, and use it for the things it is good at, and maybe still use ourselves for the things it's not.
Jason, that's a great point to I think to end on. Before we go, just keen to understand what's going on in your world. Obviously, conscious we're quickly approaching the end of 2025 and running into 2026. What are
Yeah,
you kind
sad
of
times.
thinking about focusing on and are going to be doing over the next few months?
Yeah, well, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm a consultant, so I'm always always looking for work. I naively thought that I'd get away from the man by not working full time for people, but now I just trying to attract the attention of a variety of the men and obviously the women as well. So it's I'm obviously always interested in speaking to people about work around trying to upskill and improve product teams, doing a bit of coaching, bit of training. Just wrapped a fractional contract up, so definitely up for a new one of those. But yeah, just generally got kind of night or kind of grandiosely call it a portfolio career with regards to like a bit of training, bit of coaching, bit of content work. Still doing my podcast. Thinking about other kind of opportunities to kind of build out things in the new year, as well as obviously working with clients, doing assessments. I'm basically the worst product person in the world because like all the books would say just pick one of those things. But as again, it's a portfolio career, so I pick a lot of the things because I enjoy doing all of them. But yeah, so lots of thinking at the moment about breakout new things, new things to do in the new year. But bread and butter remains speaking to clients, speaking to teams, and trying to make them be better at doing the product stuff. So yeah, that's definitely what I'm up to in the next few months and
Amazing,
probably
amazing. Well, look,
beyond.
thanks so much for your time, Jason, and I hope you get to speak again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cheers.